So what sprang from the Venetian black nobility um, in the 17th and 18th century is a fusing of a few new families, but in particular a new bent in their existing philosophy of human degradation. And I'm going to begin briefly with the story of Sabbatai Zevi. And again, here's some of the authors I'm drawing from. And I'm going to go through a real superficial account of him. But in short, he is a self-proclaimed messiah, and figures go as high as 80% of world Jewry was behind him, believing in him. Upon his death, uh, Sabbatai Zevi would end up marching into Turkey. He was held captive, given the choice of converting or dying. He converts. It sets the template up for this idea of being a crypto actor in this larger agenda. And the agenda would be forwarded also by Jacob Frank. And the idea here is ascension through dissension. And Rabbi Antelman phrased it like this. They believe this is the combination now between these followers of Sabbatai Zevi and Jacob Frank, who considered himself the reincarnated Zevi. And together we get a cult, is what most of these doctors and rabbis are calling this. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dr. Deep State. We're excited today to have the Catholic State, Justin and John Carter, in the house with us. The title today of our show is Crypto-Jewish Infiltration of the Church, with a little bit of a focus on Sabbatean Frankism and how that really infiltrated, in a sense, Christendom itself and the very belly of the Catholic Church, which is the animating principle of Christendom. So we're excited about the show today, and a basic idea of what we'll be up to here is we will be talking a little bit from my end. I want to talk about our 3 shows that we did this week that really were set up for this idea of the Sabbatean Frankist entering the church. They all wearing masks there. And it's a huge story. We can only hit a piece of it. We're pulling our Memory Hole Friday piece, the 3rd show of our week, up to you to kind of give you a little sense of how we have kind of a jazz style around a central theme, the 3 of us. And I'll just give you a little take on what we did this week. I am going to talk about Jewish magic, and I'll give you a little bit of that in our show this week. Justin's going to talk about a show that just was aired today called, very similar title, very similar theme. And John Carter has information, some heavy research he's been involved on that should really knock your socks off. So I think it should be a show that, between the 3 parts, weaving together, you'll hear stuff perhaps that you have not heard before, or at least an introduction to it. I just want to open up a little bit of our show this week. I'm going to do it really quick because I'll pop back and forth with some of these ideas. But we opened up this week with Saint Ignatius and the Empire of Spectacle. Again, that idea of connecting modern spectacle and the idea of the saints helping escape it, in part by recognizing Jewish magic and Jewish principles of non-contradiction that can work mind whammies on the human population. By the way, that intro, I'll probably play a little segment again. That's a blast from the past. That's one of my Deep State videos, part 5 of Why Free Porn. And that was the section that dealt with the infiltration of Western, we'll call it Christendom. So we started out this week with this, and the question again was dealing with anti-Christian attacks in our day. Jewish spellcasting, very powerful, how it works. And I mentioned that it's so, one of the key tricks, and we opened up with a little clip from Brother Kramer here. It's so out there. This is the power of the magic. It's so out there that he describes the sodomy and the entering of the semen and the things that are just, you're real back. And this is how the This is their demonology. And he goes through the Kabbalah really briefly, magic for seducing the world, for getting money, for creating a grand deception. And most people just leave this piece out of scripture and the protection of the church. And it's very powerful. One of the themes I want us to bear in mind today, and by the way, at the end, we'll drop down to locals to finish this off. But, Aleister Crowley, evil must hide in plain sight, for the rules of the universe demand it. So the more in your face, think Epstein files, think an event that happened in October, this comical production of an event with these goat herders in with lawnmower engines come over the fence, and all the story's so outrageous that if you don't push back, they are magically empowered. And that's how Brother Kramer ended this just bizarre, insight into the demonology. He was raised in this sect and he came out of it, and your mind, it's just too much information. Our memory hole pulled to connect the dots piece ended up being 2 hours. I only got halfway through. So we're going to kick some of these ideas. We saw the great event, the pandemic 6 years ago. How did so many people, knowing it's right in your face, and even when we see Fauci coming out and being on trial, how could it be that we're losing this massive war, interrupting the world economy, and we'll have Pete Hegseth go, we got another $2 trillion we want, and if you don't want to give it to us, you're a communist. How do they just get away with this? And, Brother Kramer says, if you don't think there's an issue, you're under Jewish mind. You're under their spellcraft. He put it in very simple terms. And I'm going to show you something really quick. I got the mic here and I'll just let you go. This is part of the Jewish spellcasting. And I want to show this. I just saw this morning on X. It's called Israel Exposed. This is all of the atrocities going on over there in the Middle East over the last couple of years. It's a total of 64,537 videos, 17,900 photographs, and it's all in one source. And I could only look at it for a moment. It is so disturbingly shocking, all predicated on some phony baloney event that people, what are you pro-homo? This is spellcraft, right? And so we need to connect this to the infiltration of Western society and the church itself. We can't do all of the pieces, but when we get to what Justin's going to say and John's going to say, this is just so out there and there's no pushback. How do you explain it? If you were to look at these photographs, each individual one would make you sick. It's so disgusting. And how many are there? 17,905 photos. It is what's going on under the nose of the world. And who are the most quiet in the whole world? Who is the most protective of what's going on? It's Christians, honestly, for the most part, and Catholics as well. This is an abomination, and people really need to search their conscience and really ask themselves, am I under a spell? Am I giving cover for this by saying, oh, Lord, help us from the black pill people, and just make a joke out of people that are just it's in your face. It's right there. And you say nothing. And, me talking about it, Justin talking about it, John talking about it. It's like, this is what we're talking about. This is exactly the spell. It's right there. It's evil in plain sight. It's available on a channel right now called Israel Exposed, and it's in one site, and you can pull it down, and it's beyond anything my mind can imagine. So a little bit of next week, we're going to be beginning with a little bit of St. Thomas, because he really shows us when he combat Jewish magic that there's a certain dialectic, or they break the laws of non-contradiction. So somehow I can be a good Catholic, I can be a good Christian and give cover for that. That should be problematic. You're under a spell. That's what Brother Kramer was saying. And it's really part of this great deception. And we come back to how do we kind of get and embrace the rules of non-contradiction, all the things that have always been true about the church, especially identifying the enmity between the city of God and the city of man. So we want to be able to understand that to get out of this spell. So I'm going to only go that far. I've done enough yapping over here. And John's got so much. I'll probably put John's in one section so we can really keep focus on what John's going to say. So we're going to finish. We'll hopefully do most of John's, but we might pull it down to local. So I can't guarantee but it's insane information and we have to kind of snap out of it. That's what we're here for, especially if you claim to be traditional and embrace the fullness of the faith. You really, I'm sorry if I'm sounding a little bit judgy, but this, you got to start speaking up for the fullness of things that have always been true of the faith. I'm going to kick it over to you, Justin. You just did a show on the, and one of the key parts here, and I've already talked enough over here to really understand this Gnostic idea, or you can call it this Talmudic Kabbalist idea of ascension through dissension. And the idea we can either help to make all of the world angels or sinners. Let's go with the sin. And it's about sparks in the world and the material prison. This is the belief system, right? This is what's going to be Noahidism. That's the digital Noahide prison. This is what you have to sign on for, this antichrist belief in the world. That, and we have to go into the depths of the evil to release it, to bring on the Messiah. It sounds nuts. In the bottom of the day, the church has always understood that we're at enmity with these people. And when that was blurred at Vatican II, it was very problematic. And we're here to kind of help us understand how the church always understood this infiltration in order so that we are not kind of lost in their spell casting. Sorry about talking so much, you guys, but I'll try to shut up in this part. Justin, how do you want to kick it off? Your piece from today, or wherever?
Yeah. I'll go with that, and then I'll lead it up to John because he's got the good stuff. So, not that our stuff is that bad, but his stuff's really good. But anyways, I released a video today called "Jacob Frank, the False Jewish Convert Who Brought a Secret Sect into the Church." So look that up on YouTube and watch it if you haven't. It's only like 23 minutes and 42 seconds. But anyways, I basically in the video, I compare Jacob Frank to Simon Magus from the book of Acts 8, right? Where that's where the word simony comes from. He wants to, it's not that he just wants to come into the church because he has faith, but he comes into the church because he has an agenda, right? He has an agenda. He sees what these apostles are doing, right? And he wants that power for himself, right? So he has an agenda, and he doesn't want to come in follow the church to follow Christ, but he has an agenda on what he wants, and he sees this. Speaking of magic, speaking of Kabbalah and magic, he's already, he's a Samaritan, right? So he's already using something similar to Kabbalah himself, but he sees what the apostles are doing and it's better. So he wants that power. So he tries to buy his way into the church. And then, of course, Peter rebukes him and says, get out of here, right? But anyways, the whole point is, centuries later, you got Zabbatai Zevi in, the 17th century. And then he tries to claim himself to be a false Messiah, right? Like Dr. Haugen was saying earlier. And then he gives in to the Muslims, the Ottoman Turks, when they're just convert or die, he converts. But his crypto, I guess you can call them crypto Muslims, right? Or crypto Jews in the Muslim world, they kind of, the Sabbateans, they find a new leader in Jacob Frank in the 18th century. And Jacob Frank is like Simon Magus and Zabbatai Zevi, and that he wants to be, he has an agenda. And his agenda is he wants to be the Messiah, right? And so since the Jews won't accept him as the Messiah, his agenda is to infiltrate the church like Simon Magus and try to set himself up as the new Jesus, right? So, and that's how he infiltrated and brought a lot of his followers to infiltrate Polish Catholicism, right? And just you can watch the video. That's just a synopsis of it. But the point really to take away from here is that there's a lot of crypto Jews, and there's there's crypto Protestants and crypto Muslims and others too. But there's a lot of people that come into the church, the Catholic Church, because they can see the power it has, because it's true. It really is the true Church of God. And they want to come in and try to change it. They want to mold the church into their image instead of molding themselves into the church's image, right? And that leads us to what John's about to talk about, which really is the fact that there's this group called Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism, which sounds good on paper, but they really have a nefarious aim. And what their nefarious aim really is to promote this false state of Israel, to promote Zionism, and to promote really the embracing of the coming of the Antichrist. Because the Antichrist is going to be Jewish. He's going to rule from at least the third temple, whatever that temple looks like. Watch Dr. Deep State's videos. There's an interpretation he has that the temple could be not a literal physical temple, but more of a temple where, where a technocratic temple, so to speak, right? But anyways, the point of where I'm going with this is this group, the Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism, is an offshoot of a group that we already fought against a year or so ago called the Philos Project, or the Philos Project, with the Philos or Philos Catholics. And that group was created and funded by a rich billionaire Jew named Paul Singer, who's the guy that shuts down small countries and shuts down working class towns and spends millions of dollars funding Trump and also funding transgenderism for children, right? Transgender programs for children. This guy is like an evil James Bond villain type Jew, right? And we exposed that group last year, and they're basically kind of fractured. But now this Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism is still led by Simone Riscala, who claims to be Catholic, right? And essentially she's running this group now, and she's also affiliated with Catholic Answers, EWTN, the Avila Institute, all these quote unquote traditionalist or conservative Catholic group organizations. And what they're doing is they're putting chapters in colleges. They're starting with Franciscan University here in Ohio, and they're using these chapters to indoctrinate young Catholic students to believe that Zionism is okay, to promote this false state of Israel, to be on their side, right? Even though they're committing all these atrocities, even against Catholics, like Doug was talking about earlier, and they're promoting, like they're saying that supersessionism is not the teaching of the church. They're all the stuff we talk about. They're going against that. And what it's really going to come down to is they're going to try to use this all to help indoctrinate these students to be sheep to the slaughter, to accept the Jewish Antichrist when he comes. So this is really what's happening. And John Carter, and I'm about to shut up, but John Carter is going to talk here, and he's going to show all the connections that this organization, like it seems nice on paper, all its military and government and political connections, and going to show how this organization is it's corrupt from all sides, and how it's anti-Catholic, and really it's just demonic and antichrist. And I'm going to shut up and let you guys take it from there.
No, good one, Justin. And I'll just say this to get John started about the concept of the crypto concept. A lot of people can't get their heads around the deep state because they're looking for these certain last names. And part of the crypto idea is you change your name. And next week, for example, on our locals, we're going to be going into Cromwell and the Jews and the English Revolution. And that's a long story. I went into pretty in depth in a chapter here on In Pursuit of the Metaverse. But, we're used to names. This is part of the conspiracy, like Darwin or Huxley or Galton or David Ricardo. And I could go on and on with the literary figures, the economists and so forth, that were become the Fabian Society that embraced this. None of them have these Rubenstein last name. So a lot of people don't quite make the connections. That's how they roll. And they do it, in the Muslim world and South America and Asia. And that's how they do it. And when you do it that way, you only need a few actors to kind of have leverage over the rest of society. But we're going to be hitting that next week. And just to maybe get John's kind of a little pumped up, because what I would argue here is you don't necessarily have to be in a direct, like, freaking in Illuminati. I'll give you to play 90 seconds here. It is a family operation. Oligarchy is a family operation, but you can bring in other names into it. And you probably might be familiar with the intermarriage of the mercantile class and the nobility in England. That's how they kind of produce this strain. And so it is a little tricky when we talk about the deep state, but there is a cosmic agenda against it, against God and man, Christ and the church, and it's typologically has a lineage that the church, when we go on, again, links are in the description for our 3 shows we have each week. And we're going to be delving into this, for example, next week. Now, this is like a over the top story about a black mass involving a not so living Charlie Kirk. And it may or may not be true. But the point is, when it's leaked through whistleblowers that are in disguise, your mind shuts down because it just couldn't be so. That's the magic. That's where they get you. It's the externalization of it and your inability to connect the dots and get out of their magic spell, their spectacle. So I'm going to play like 90 seconds of this, just a little bit more backdrop. So what I'm saying here, what John's talking about, this infiltration, they may or may not be sincere. They might totally be crypto, but there's a spirit around them of not wanting to embrace the fullness of the church. And that's what he's going for, whether or not they're truly in this lineage.
Their project of redemption, salvation through sin. And it's going to be a grand initiation. And this is a lot of merging of people and forces here, but I'll just bring this down to a moment. In 1773, an unholy trinity. If you've kind of looked into oligarchical or deep state collusions in the past, those are 3 pretty big names right there. So Jacob Frank, his families are interconnecting with other players on the ground, and these include certain Jesuit agents and so forth. But the banking elite is interfused in every possible way with the Sabbatean project of ascension through dissension, and that they see themselves as a messianic people to bring around the fruition of this messianic character. And again, this is a combination of the different authors that we were talking about through the infiltration. This is using the classic techniques of the Venetian oligarchy that they are mostly already a part of. The invisible network went into play. Invisible network, we're talking about biopolitics, elusive to rational investigation. 41 years after Zebi's.
Okay, so we know that even when we talked about the agent right here, we know that even Weishaupt was an example of somebody that infiltrated the church. He was a crypto, a converso. So this idea can be traced back all the way 2,000 years, frankly, as in a sense Justin just did with Simon the magician. But famously, there was a decree in 1489 of Constantinople, go make your sons doctors and lawyers and such, and subvert Christianity from the inside out. So it's an ancient agenda, but a lot of people that only go back to the Frankists are kind of missing the fundamental enmity between the city of God and the city of man and the agents in place of Antichrist. So a lot to do there, but he did kind of mention the banking families. So John has made some amazing connections between these people. And one last thing I'm going to say here. A lot of people like to say it's the normies, the WTN crowd, the Novus Ordo Church. John's research, because that means we feel kind of over it and like we're traddy. John's research is focused on the trad element. The devil will get you anywhere, right? So we're really focused on being the salt of the earth, getting out of the spectacle of empire, and really picking at the trads that don't want to talk about world affairs and the idea of psyops, like the one that happened October a couple years ago, that's just laughable that you're going to take at face value. How does that get you into the spectacle and repeating this synagogue's propaganda to other Christians that are trying to become more holy and not caught into their web. Okay, way too much talking on my part. I'm going to kick up your slides, John, and we're going to get your research up here. How you doing, John Carter?
I sent you an updated one, Dr. Haugen.
Yep, got it.
So in an introduction, we think about Catholic tradition and the saints, and the conviction those men and women must have had to knowingly walk to the chopping block or to suffer great torture. They had to have great conviction, and conviction comes from knowledge, but it has to be fortified with grace. And I think as we dive into this stuff, you got to keep in mind that this isn't a slander attack or we're trying to defame anybody. It is trying to understand something that's almost not understandable because these people are crazy. They're crazy. So that's how I want to start this presentation. But I saw researching Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism, just the name is a pattern. So when you see these great slogans and great names, it takes about 5 minutes to get back to someone who's in the Rockefeller Rothschild crowd. It's simple. They create these organizations, and so when talking about the coalition, just based on what you've been saying and Catholic State has said, Jacob Frank was the same time as one of the Eberstats I'll be talking about. Moses Levy, there's a Moses Levy from London, there's a Moses Levy from Morocco. Morocco was a slave runner, slaveholder in Florida that was friends with the father of Judah P. Benjamin, the Secretary of State and I think of Finance of the Confederacy. So these roots run deep. The Philos Project, which I'm going to get into here, if you study Moses Levy, Levy, from Morocco, you're going to find out he was part of an organization that was set up in Florida called the Philo-Judean Society. It's just a precursor to the modern Philos Project. If you look at Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism, it wasn't created in a vacuum. It's something that was started in 1939. So as we dig into this, it brings me to Nietzsche's quote, which is, he who sees too much ends up not fitting in anywhere. I'm going
to just interrupt you there, John. That's just a reality. To embrace the fullness of the truth, other people that are in the spectacle are going to it's part of experiencing this. And this is why some people don't want to go into it. So I'm going to essentially just say this. We meet, the three of us, every Friday and talk about memory hold material because we believe it's essential that Catholics understand this stuff and it's not being talked about. I do 3 shows a week. And we as a community go into this, and our experience is building in the faith by identifying this. So again, I want to invite everybody to that is interested to our Dr. Deep State Catholic community over on Locals. Links are in the description. And I'm sorry about interrupting you there, but I thought I'd just stick it in there right with that Nietzsche quote because
that's good.
It's the beginning of your transformation. And that's what we believe as Catholics. You don't just assent to some belief in Christ. You allow the Holy Spirit to change you that you want and have a desire for the fullness of truth, which often involves uncomfortable conversations in order to fully defend your own faith and to defend the church.
So ignorance is bliss and knowledge is suffering. And the Jews want us to be in this state of bliss, this spectacle. So what I'm going to present now, it's not judgment. I don't have to judge anybody. I'm just stating facts. I'm sharing facts, patterns, and genealogical power structures that speak for themselves. So I'm convinced that what we're about to dive into, that these structures of power are metaphysical in nature, that the people that are involved, most of them don't even know they're involved in it. They're under this spell. So let's get into it. So the Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism is, in summary, in my opinion, is the intersection of environmentalism eugenics, and Americanism. And as Archbishop Fulton Sheen said,
Hey,
we are
really
not in
quick.
favor.
Sorry to interrupt. Doug, can you make it wider so it?
Let me try.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me try.
I just want to make sure everybody sees it.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to read the
Okay.
bottom one. It's
Let
Archbishop
me
Sheen.
hit pause in case I end up jerking it around. So let me.
Okay. Archbishop Fulton Sheen exclaimed, he didn't say, he exclaimed, we are not in favor of an established church in the United States. We do not want an established church in the United States. We do not want an established church and have never wanted it. We are loyal to the United States and we propose to remain loyal to it. So let's go to the next slide. David Rockefeller. We are grateful to the Washington Post, New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during those years. But the world is more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supernatural national sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practice in past centuries. Next slide, please.
Yep.
So let's talk about bankers. Otto Kahn and the origins of the intelligence community. Otto Kahn, you can see below, in the artificial intelligence, was born to Jewish parents. His mom was an Eberstadt. And on the right, you're going to see one of his direct lineage relatives, nephew, I believe, the CIA founder's vision, Frederick Eberstadt, written in 2010. So this guy's grandfather, Frederick's grandfather, was in the great lineage of the Eberstadts from Eastern Germany, from Worms, where, if I'm not mistaken, the Rothschilds came from, and a certain idiot from 1517.
Yeah, Luther had his trial there.
Yeah. So you got this guy writing a book in 2010 saying the CIA, a founder's vision. Well, who was the founder? A Jew. He wrote the bylaws for the CIA in the 1930s. And he says here, my father, Ferdinand Eberstadt, was the man who drew up the original bylaws for the CIA. So he also was at Dillon Reed.
I just want people to have that sink in. People say words like CIA and they're still thinking TV shows. The bankers who are creating a world system have agencies, as you know, MI6, Mossad, KGB. They're the ones that create the planks of the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, the World Bank, the International Trade Organization, and here the agencies that are going to be involved both in the production of Hollywood and in the colonialization, as in Secrets of an Economic Hitman. That's what they do. They're building the beast system. So let that sink in. Who created it? It's not an American thing. It's an independent agency, just like the Federal Reserve. It's not. It's independent of our interest. And no, it's very few people say that out loud. They say, oh, it's CIA. What does that mean? It means they work for the international bankers to create a new world order. Okay. Sorry.
That's it. So let's just dive in a little bit deeper to Eberstadt in their own words. A financially irresponsible murderer on the lam who spent his life whoring among New York City's theatrical talent. Next slide.
Coming.
There's one, while you were giving your introduction, Dr. Haugen, I wanted to read something I found on the internet. Eberstadt was a notable figure who interacted with Jacob Joseph Frank, a Polish Jewish religious leader known for founding the Frankist movement. Their relationship is often discussed in the context of Frank's controversial teachings and the social religious dynamics of the time. Eberstadt knew Frank. So this book is written by a Jew named Andrea Nolan. She's writing about the Kahn family, which is related to the Eberstadts. And this will give you a little bit of salt and pepper and some spice as to who these people are. So Eberstadt family were Jewish industrialists from the same German duchy that nurtured the Rothschilds, Hesse, and who had battled their way into imperial power by the way of the 1848 revolutions. So in the above letter, he knew personally Lord Palmerston. So we're going back to the very roots of Zionism and the creation of the state of Israel. These are some of the top think tank of the times of the 19th century. And this is an important. This is from a book she wrote on Otto Kahn. Most of the British Empire's foreign intelligence was collected between Lloyd's of London, the Royal Navy, and the British East India Company, which were in practice three parts to the same state-subsidized business concern. Sounds like the U.S. today. By the 1800s, the BEI and Lloyd's were controlled by families of German-speaking merchant bankers who resided in London but were originally from Holy Roman Empire territories. Next slide.
This whole,
To a
I
large
just want to
extent-
stress, this is our point that we make over here. This whole Anglo-American empire, it's still an extension of the city of London to this day. And we are locked in. When we're locked into the spectacle, we repeat these lies of liberalism that have been condemned by the church. And that's part of having traditionalists be salty, is understanding that the devil and even artificial intelligence itself is part of the same system. I know that gets wacky, but that's what the Dark Enlightenment believes. That's the unfolding of this political system that they created and that we're taught to love and worship. It's an idol, and we oftentimes mention that, and that's a big thing that John is also very much keyed into.
Yeah, so what's important is understand that when we talk about intelligence services, the very foundation, as written by a Jewish lady about her own family, to a large extent, networks of criminals turned informants were made legit as federal level law enforcement agencies from the 1860s onward. What does that mean? That means after the War of Northern Aggression, after the 1848 wars. We saw this before with respect to the goat story. The U.S. Treasury Secret Service was originally outfitted with crooks who policed rival gangs. That's what the drug trade is today, guys. The extent to which the cultures of these organizations have changed has only been too obvious in U.S. political culture since 2016. And here's a continuation. Allison May leaves out from the above was that Lewis & Lewis was a law firm from London, that Lewis was actually a Jew. He was a Jew. You can go study this yourself. You read this book. Specialized in representing theater people and literary personalities. Tom Cruise, maybe. And maybe the people we're about to dig into that write for Time Magazine. Influencers, as we now would call them. And it's a little bit too small to see, but here's from a research of William J. Eberstadt. He was friends with Henry Luce. Both were influential figures in the mid-20th century American media and politics, with Eberstadt serving as a key advisor and strategist who helped shape Luce's internationalist vision and media empire's political connections. Next slide. Henry Luce, the next slide, please.
Oh, not this one?
No,
Okay.
yeah, it's, I'm not sure if we're on the same, yeah, there you go. That's it. So here's
Okay.
the famous book, John Courtney Murray, Time, Life, and the American Proposition, whereby media mogul Henry R. Luce, who was groomed by Eberstadt. He's a founder and publisher of an enormously influential magazines like Time and Life, used the CIA's doctrinal warfare program to turn the Catholic Church into a promoter of American ideas. So behind
Wow.
Luce, yeah, next slide, please.
And
Now we
there's a
get into the-
relationship there between the loose that, you know, my dissertation was on the rise of American empire, and the person out of the Navy College was Luce, who it's also created. And you think of a conjunction there of selling Americans on this, because we're supposed to be a republic that are not an empire building. It's selling this long story of selling this project. This is where we're at today, looking this. What's going on in the world is nothing but controlled demolition. This narrative should make no sense to anybody. Anyway, sorry.
Okay, ignore the next one, please.
Okay, sorry about that, John. Okay.
No,
Couldn't help
that's
myself.
this helps. So, Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism. This is their landing page. What their mission is, supposedly in fidelity to the gospel. I'm wondering which Christ they're talking about. I think it's the anti one. You go to the next slide. Here are the three principal founders of the coalition. It's hard to say. Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism. Andrew Duran. I know Catholic State knows him. Went to school with him, actually. And I'm not going to dive into all his background other than to say that he was at the State Department. And then he was also, for some reason, in his bio, he puts in one important person who's a mentor, Mary Eberstadt.
Wow.
Yeah, Mary. And
You
then
are
you go down
connecting
looking.
some dots there, John.
Yeah, then you got founding member is Simone Riscala, who is now advancing the mission of the CCAA, the Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism, at the Institute on Religion and Democracy.
It
So,
rhymes with Kabbalah.
yes. Then you got on the
Remember,
right. You
hold
got
on,
another
John.
Jewish girl.
Remember also Simone Riscala was also the director of the Philos Catholic, and that was funded by Jew Paul Singer as well.
Bingo. So then you got on the right, you got a young Jewish girl named Yael Shalvelson. And what's kind of an interesting that she was did a fellowship at the Claire Booth Luce Center for Conservative Women. So then let's click on go down one more slide. And then those are the three people on the landing page about the coalition. It doesn't mention Mary Eberstadt, but heck, Mary's the one who, quote, from Artificial Intelligence, helps launch the Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism, and even drafted the coalition's mission statement ahead of its October 2023 conference.
The same people that drafted the CIA.
Bingo.
That
Bingo.
You're hearing it here first, people. This is pretty.
Wow.
This is pretty significant. And
yeah.
Wow.
Next slide. So here's next one down, please. One more.
Yep. Up.
Right there. Andrew Duran. Okay. This is from the Council on Foreign Relations website, CFR. So he's being interviewed at the CFR. And you can also see that he served on the executive secretariat of the U.S. National Commission for UNESCO at the State Department. UNESCO was set up for eugenics and population control. You cannot be for population control and be Catholic.
These
So
are the
Andrew-
Huxley brothers from the Fabian
Yeah.
Society.
That's
This
incredible.
is who they are. He quoted, he was the first ever in the mid 1950s to quote the term transhumanism. So it's a combination of humanism, which is Luciferianism, and eugenics. And this is the roots of this Antichrist project. Yep.
So Andrew was he says on his website, he served at the State Department in various capacities over 13 years, including 3 years on the Secretary's policy planning staff, the office founded by diplomat George Kennan. Kennan was who was Kennan, by the way? His dad, George Kennan's dad, was named Kossuth. How come? Because he was his mentor. But who was Lajos Kossuth? He was a Freemason and is considered one of the most famous Hungarian Freemasons, known for his contributions to ideas of democracy and liberty in 1848. So who was Mary Eberstadt? Well, dang,
Wow.
she's a writer for Time magazine. And what about the girl Yael? Yeah, there she is at the Luce Center. So we go to the next slide real quick. We're gonna run through this.
Yep.
So we got two mentors, and there's the spelling. I threw this presentation together, so there's some typos, unfortunately.
Don't worry
Two
about
mentors, one fifth column. Andrew Doran's friend and mentor is Mary Eberstadt. He says so. Who is married to Nicholas Eberstadt, whose grandfather, Ferdinand Adolf Eberstadt, wrote the bylaws of the CIA, whose grandfather, Ferdinand Falk Eberstadt, was in 1848 a revolutionary of the Jewish type. Andrew served on the Secretary of State's policy planning staff, an office created by George Kennan. His father was named after Lajos Kossuth, who was one of the most famous Hungarian Freemasons during the 1848 Hungarian Revolution. And he was a friend of Horace Greeley, Frederick Engels, and Giuseppe Mazzini, who was friends with Albert Pike, the letter about the 3 world wars. So then you got Eberstadt's late mentor, was Ambassador. This is Mary Eberstadt's late mentor, was Ambassador Jean J. Kirkpatrick, whose husband was in the OSS during World War II. Next slide, please.
Coming at you.
Yeah, so here we go. Who are the Eberstadts? And this is part of this came from a book, The Will to Win, a biography of Ferdinand Eberstadt, who was predominant in the early 20th century. But the founder was friends with Lord Palmerston, was the first Jewish mayor in Germany. And then you go to that guy's grandson, Ferdinand. He was at Dillon Reed and Company. I wish that we had Catherine Austin Fitz. I'd like to ask her some questions. and wrote the bylaws for the forming the CIA. He was friends with Bernard Baruch, who was the main advisor to Winston Churchill, who was friends with James Forrestal, who supposedly committed suicide somehow.
Yeah, yeah. And part of this that you're putting together, George Kennan, that's called like Roosevelt's Brain Trust. So they do the American expansion during the Cold War and really just advance this. It's what we call globalism, right? But it's all hooked into the CIA, and yeah.
So then you got his son Frederick went to Phillips Exeter, Princeton, and then he was a photographer at Life and then Life magazine and Town and Country. And he was also later on he switched careers to become a psychotherapist. And then his son Nicholas.
MK Ultra.
Yeah, I know. Then you got Nicholas, Phillips Exeter, Harvard, London School of Economics, Rockefeller Foundation, the Catholic University, USAID, World Bank, American Enterprise Institute, World Economic Forum, Global Leadership Council. Oh, and he's married to Mary Tedeschi Eberstadt. But that name Tedeschi never shows up when you Google her. But Mary is, she's a part of the American Enterprise Institute. And if you look at their logo with the 3 slashes, and if you want to know what that means, it's about masonry and the 3 degrees of masonry: apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason. So we go to the next
that's
slide.
the ultimate network of spook schools going back to the center of intelligence, no doubt.
Yeah. So then you go into Mary Tedeschi planning. This is her for the New York Times. Her marriage to what's his name, to Eberstadt. So what I think is interesting, you can go dig into this on your own, whoever's watching this, but you go look at Tedeschi, that's a Marano or a crypto-Jewish name from Italy.
Yeah.
So New York Times, the next slide, talks about the bridegroom is a visiting fellow at the Harvard Center for Population Studies. And visiting scholar at the American Enterprise Institute for Public Policy. He graduated from Exeter and London School of Economics. And then you go over to, once again, to the mentor, Jean J. Kirkpatrick, ambassador to the United Nations under Reagan, whose husband is in OSS. And she herself, it says, quote, against what Schultz said, Schultz had told Kirkpatrick it would be an impeachable offense to do what? To support skimming money off of arms sales to fund the Nicaraguan Contras. But she was in support of that. That's who this woman is, but that was the mentor of Mary Eberstadt. So she chose as her mentor someone who was in favor of genocide. So Eberstadt is also the founder of the Kirkpatrick Society, Mary Eberstadt, and which is very, very strange because now it was been taken over by the American Enterprise Institute. So we go to the next.
Yeah, it's the prototype of the neocon network. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just get an idea who Mary is. I'm not judging. This is Mary's sister. It's got a little demon on there. If you go to the next slide.
Yep. Whoop, coming.
Yeah. This is Mary Eberstadt from her website, from Mary's sister, Fernanda. As a kid, you think you're the only one. You feel so strange, so out of kilter. And then in the bottom, it says, this is a quote from her book, Bite Your Friends, Stories of the Body Militant, a history memoir that features saints, philosophers, prophets, and rebel artists from Diogenes to Pussy Riot, along with the running story of me and my mother. Okay, that's Mary's sister. And then you go to the next slide, please.
I like
She talks about
Pussy Riot, but they're not as good as Vagina Dialogue.
In 1983, my older brother, then a Harvard demographer, the one we've been talking about, let me tag along on a research trip across the old Soviet Union. What are they doing in the Soviet Union, I wonder? Anyway, what's interesting is that her husband, this girl's husband, wrote the book on the right, A Revolution in Progress. And then below, you'll see what Ferdinand Eberstadt, a Wall Street banker who was active in government in World War II, this is what his daughter says about her dad. He was a son of 2 ambitious immigrants, a Venezuelan mother and a German Jewish father. Ferdinand made himself firmly part of the WASP power establishment. That's the 5th column. She just described it. You just change your name and merge right in. So go into the next slide, has this kind of all together, where you'll find the Philos Project on the top left.
Yeah, I'll just
Um,
when we think of like the Bush family and Harrimans and connecting to the banking, Prescott Bush. This is so these Anglo elites and the American elites who we kind of look at as very waspy. There's always been that connection at the top of these star families. It's essentially advancing this new Jerusalem. That's what America, that's what this project is. It's the new Jerusalem. It's the muscle that will create the Antichrist system. And we call it
yeah.
words like globalism, but that's a meaningless term.
Next slide. Yeah, here we go. So the top left is the Philos Project, which is the father of the Institute on Religion and Democracy, which is the institution that houses the Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism, which has connections to Hoover Institute, Faith and Freedom Coalition, which, by the way, is Ralph Reed, and also Rabbi Jonathan Cahn. And then that's also tied into the Faith and Reason Institute, which is connected into Opus Dei, the Catholic Information Center, which is all hinged at the hip to the CIA. All of these have connections. Let's go to the next slide, please.
Coming at
So
you.
then we have Mary Abestat, who is associated with the Tikva Fund as a writer and public speaker, while Leonard Leo is connected through his involvement in conservative political circles that align with the fund's mission. Well, what is the fund's mission? Advancing Jewish excellence in Western civilization through education and ideas. I don't see Catholic anywhere in there. Next slide talks about, there's many articles on this guy, Opus Dei and the Moneybag Kid, but the networks, I've dug into all these networks in that right slide, but it includes Rick Perry, Greg Abbott, Ron DeSantis, all these, supposed Catholic leaders, and also, Freemasonic leaders like Cruz, etc. But it's all tied together through the money. So you go to the next slide, we'll kind of give you a highlight of who the leadership is of all these organizations. Philo's the top left, and you're going to see Philo's to the right, Institute on Religion and Democracy, then the Coalition of Catholics in the middle, Faith and Reason below, Federal Society on the right, Catholic Information Center, Opus Dei at the bottom, and kind of bottom center, Tikva. You'll see the names Mark Tooley, ex-CIA, a Methodist, Baylor University, involved in the Philos Project, involved in the Institute on Religion and Democracy. You're going to see Dr. Mark Levitch, who is a just war theoretician. He's also a guide at Auschwitz. I'm not sure what he's showing there. And then you got Dr. Mark Levitch over at the Institute of Religion and Democracy. And then you got Rick Eberstadt, who's the son of Mary Eberstadt at Philos. And then you got the mother below in the Coalition of Catholics. And then you got the mother at Faith and Reason. And then you got the mother at Catholic Information Service. And
John, just real quick, I think Simone Rascala is also at Tikva too, because remember she sent me that email a week ago showing that how the Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism is doing like their joint. She admitted they're doing a joint operation with Tikva, like they're.
She's there.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
you're exactly right. I had this slide on. I guess in editing, I
Yeah.
edited it out.
Okay.
Yeah, she's there. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's there. So she's at all that. Then you got other notables. Is Andrew, who's friends with Mary. He's also at the Coalition of Catholics and the Philos Project. And at the very bottom, at Catholic Information Service, you have Leonard Leo, and then you have Patricia Scalia. You'll see the Scalia name also at the Federal Society with Antonin Scalia, which also involves Mary's son, Rick. So that's a lot of, there's how many Americans? I think 330 million. It's funny how these institutions have everybody. That's crazy. Go to the next slide. One of the Philos Project leaders is a guy named Richard Land. He's a Southern Baptist Convention leader, friends with Billy Graham, and he's also a big just war theory promoter. So these guys are pushing for the genocide that's happening now. They've been pushing for the war after Mossad knocked down the towers. They've been pushing for everything that's been happening in the last 20 years for sure. And here you go, Richard Land. It's interesting to read that that the men around his longtime friend George W. Bush don't sit around waiting for Land's call. They reach out to him individually and as part of a weekly teleconference with other Christian conservatives to plot strategy on such issues as gay marriage and abortion. Richard Land's wife's name is Rebecca with a K and Ruth. That's all I'm going to say. Go to the next slide. We'll go into Faith and Reason Institute real quick. It's with Mary Eberstadt, also involves Dr. Royal. And what's interesting is that he received fellowships to study in Italy at the Renaissance Society of America, which is connected to Samuel Henry Kress, who himself was a Freemason. And then this Royal is a Fulbright Scholar, which is simply was founded by a Rhodes Scholar, which is simply an extension of Chatham House, which is an extension of the East India Company and Jewish control. So
Right.
go
The
to the
Milner
next.
Group. Yeah.
Yeah, Milner Group. Next slide shows the cross-pollination of all this Jewish funding. So those organizations in the middle of the funders, and then you'll see Faith and Reason, Philos, Federal Society, Rick Eberstadt, Institute on Religion and Democracy, and then you have Leonard. I keep putting Leonardo. I'm just getting my Portuguese mindset takes over. Leonard Leo, David Rifkin, his Jewish lawyer, Ralph Reed, and Jonathan Kahn, that also are tied to a guy named Taylor Marshall from Dallas. So then
I think it's
you
Fort
look
Worth.
at yeah. And you look at one of the foundations, the Bradley Foundation, where Eugene Scalia is on the board. So you'll start seeing Patricia Scalia, who I sat next to and had dinner with in 2009, roughly, me between her and her husband. And I've been a part of this network. So next slide, we go into what's really behind all this coalition for Catholics against anti-Semitism is really population control. Right there, yeah. There are direct ties between the top eugenicist scientists, the president of the Council on Foreign Relations, and Mary Eberstadt. John Holdren, Paul Ehrlich, and Richard Haas are Jewish. Mary Eberstadt is married to Nicholas Eberstadt, who's Jewish, and he is a population demographer and co-writes with fellow Jew and CFR president Richard Haas. Ehrlich and Holdren, I know John Holdren. Where I am right now, I hosted him where I am right now years ago. I took him fishing here. I know him. So let me just read. Ehrlich and Holdren, Jews, are the Malthusian link between the Rockefellers and Maurice Strong. Holdren's boss, George Woodwell, founded Woodwell Climate Research Center to back up the climate change scam with Kabbalah science. So you'll see these books. You see the technocratic link, and we'll go to the next slide real quick. The CFC.
And I just want to do this really quick to get an idea of how old this is. So Charles Darwin, 1859, introduces this abomination, this Big Bang Kabbalah idea called evolution. And his grandfather actually created it. And you can find it. It's 9 years old. It's on here. It's called the Lunatic Society. So with him and Malthus, and these are these crypto names that are part of the English tradition. They were in the Lunatic Society. So this is an outcome of something that comes from the late 1700s and the Royal Society. That is the infiltration. It's very deep. So this is part of a Kabbalistic agenda to bring on the Antichrist. I know that sounds hyperbolic and so forth. Population control. This week we went into it on our locals. And we went into it from our book last week. This is an ancient idea. The idea of the top of the Georgia Guidestones, that's a Kabbalistic idea for their order. And so when you see these eugenics names, and they were oftentimes became after World War II crypto eugenics, so it's called like bioscience studies, and it's just crypto eugenics because I had to hide the name. So it's a constant Kabbalistic agenda that goes back hundreds of years. Sorry about that, John, but I just got excited because in the old days, they used to have names like Malthus and Huxley and Galton to kind of hide it. They don't hide it anymore. That's the externalization. They're coming out and saying, we're running your foreign policy. We're running your science. If you dare point a finger at us, that's the magic, because people are so fearful. And part of that is how it works, the control system that scripture speaks about in terms of the fear of calling out the synagogue. Sorry, John.
No, I love it. I'm pointing the finger at them, that they're from the seed of the serpent in Genesis 3:15. And this is an article written by, birth rates are booming in some countries and plummeting in others. Leading demographer Nicholas Eberstadt and Richard Haas analyze the most important trends. Richard Haas and John Holdren have both served in senior U.S. foreign policy and science roles, and professional paths that intersected through government advisory boards and policy discussions. So underneath Eberstadt and Haas, who's a CFR president, you've got him also tied in with Haas, with John Holdren from Woodsville Research Center from Harvard. That's pushing the entire fake Kabbalah science to support the fake climate change agenda. So, and then you got
It's all
Nicholas.
to create neoliberalism, or you
Yeah.
can call it whatever you want. It's to create a one system. That's what the
Yeah.
Council on Foreign Relations, but they use this liberal language it's really these crypto agents that are using this language because God willed that we have separate languages and separate tongues. The Catholic social order put that in a proper perspective. It's all an attack against the Catholic Church.
Mary Eberstadt's husband, Nicholas, is associated with the Council on Foreign Relations, where he participates in discussions on foreign policy and demographic trends. Mary, the Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism, her husband is working for the Seat of the Serpent, whose whole job is to create a one world government. So there you go. I didn't say it. I'm just connecting the dots. The next slide goes into
That's
Richard Haas
literally
and George.
Yeah, and I'm sorry because I want to keep your flow going. They had, World War I produced the attempt at, the League of Nations. That failed. They created the United Nations, and the idea of the Council on Foreign Relations, it was supposed to be the mechanism, and it's this ancient plan that you can see it's called an open conspiracy, the famous book that was written. It's to create a one world government. They're pretty explicit about it. And so when George Bush stands up there in 1991, not the rule of the jungle, he's saying it out loud. And when you say, okay, well, it's not Kamala, it's not Sleepy Joe, I'm going to sign on to it. Lesser of two evils. That's the magic that they essentially weave. Sorry.
Yeah, so George Woodwell, these aren't far off figures to me. I gave the keynote speech at his organization, Woodsville Research Center in Cape Cod. Today's called the Woodwell Research Center. I was there with a lot of these people we're talking about. So I was always trying to figure them out, why they say they wanted to save the Amazon, and they never would listen to me. They kept trying to make me to swallow their poison of climate change and carbon and all this stuff. So when I see these connections now with Richard Haas, George Woodwell, John Holdren, these epiphanies started going off in my head. So go to the next slide, please.
Just bear in mind the names. Don't you got to look at what they're saying and what they're doing more than the names. This is how they do it.
Here's what they're saying. It's worth reading this. This is Holdren. This is Holdren, who became Obama's science advisor. Wrote in his book, Eco Science, with Paul Ehrlich, who wrote The Population Bomb. He said, adding a sterilant to drinking water or staple foods is a suggestion that seems to horrify people more than most proposals for involuntary fertility control. Now I think about all the bottled water, magnesium sulfate, and all of that. And if you study magnesium sulfate, what does it have to do with fertility? Next quote, a program of sterilizing women after their second or third child, despite the relatively greater difficulty of the operation of vasectomy, might be easier to implement than trying to sterilize men. They sterilized 80% of black women in Brazil in the 1970s. They did it. Indeed, it has been concluded that compulsory population control laws, even including laws requiring compulsory abortion, could be sustained under the existing Constitution if the population crisis became sufficiently severe to endanger society. So these are the people who are calling the shots outside of the Republic and the Constitution and a lot of bullcrap. Next slide. And this is Richard Haas from the Council of Foreign Relations, the president, who's born to a Jewish family, who says, television was our chief tool in selling our policy. Next slide.
I just want to take a second. Sorry, Jack. This is think Fauci's out here this week. It's all out of the bag.
Digest.
But people still believe in it. And you knew when you took the shot and the Pope signed on for it, you're putting into your body aborted fetal tissue. They had to tell you that when you take it, you're under their spell. And so it's so important. This is a eugenicist project. They're creating, from the French Revolution to the Communist Revolution, they're trying to create a new man. Huxley would call it transhumanism. The devil hates humanity. He's going to kind of use the guise of progress and science to tell you that you're going to take away the mark, the image of God you're going to willingly transpose it. That's why we do this. And like, well, I'll just say this a minute, John and Justin, nobody's funding us. Nobody's buttering our bread. And we can go
Not
to
that
these
sure.
other,
No.
or even mock people talking about this. Try to mock the fact that you're trying to always corral people into this right to life. And then you look the other way with this clot shot that they had to tell you, aborted fetal tissue in it. It is a type of genocide that's going on, and it is an offering to Moloch. I know that's kind of often played, but it's really going up to their God. Sorry about that. But yeah,
No, that's
the
okay.
television-
I got paid with, there's a real from Saudi Arabia from 1991.
Yeah, no, so the spectacle is how they do it, through the television. Sorry, I just get imaginative.
Yeah, well, this is getting fun. This is from the Imaginative Conservative. If you recall, Dr. Haugen did a YouTube a while back about Earth Mother or whatever, Earth Alliance. And the last slide of Earth Alliance talks about Father Longnecker. Father Longnecker. Well, here we go. Here's a website called the Imaginative Conservative. And here's an article of a book review of Mary Eberstadt's book, Primal Screams, How the Sexual Revolution Created Identity Politics. It's been reviewed by Father Dwight Longnecker. So then you got, which I think is very interesting. Here's Peter Thiel. Thiel is one of the commentators featured in Mary Eberstadt's book, Primal Screams, where he offers support for her thesis. Silence. And then we go into the personal life of
Greta
Richard
Thunberg
Haas
is
and
the Antichrist.
the Council on Foreign Relations. Haas lives in New York City with his wife, Susan, and they have 2 children. And according to Axios, Haas is a member of Dialogue, a secret society founded by Peter Thiel and Aaron Hoffman.
Right.
Peter Thiel supports Mary Eberstadt's thesis by emphasizing the connection between the breakdown of the family structure and the rise of identity politics. So they're not mentioning the Jew, are they? Mrs. Eberstadt's analysis is complemented with comments, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, there you go. She, of all the people on God's green earth, she chooses Peter Thiel to be one of her people to write about her book. So next slide goes into
The Benedict option, is that relevant?
what?
Well, the Benedict option, it says there on the side, but
Yeah, it's yes. Oh my goodness. Man, I think we should go on. Well, we got some more
Okay.
slides to do.
Yep.
So Eberstadt was a contemporary of John Nelson Darby and had interactions with him. Because I knew it. Once you start seeing this stuff, you know, this is not in a
The
vacuum.
Plymouth Brotherhood is just another crypto group that he came out of. It's a little cult. It's you know who else was in front? Aleister Crowley was in the same Plymouth Brotherhood, and Darby were part of the same freaking cult.
Yeah. And you can see their impact on evangelicalism and their collaboration and mutual influence helped shape the direction of evangelical thought in the 19th century. They created it. They seeded it. They directioned it to where it is today, where you have these idiots running our government, Hegseth, and these idiots. Anyway, I'm not going to get mad. Next slide. Here we go. Introduction. The story of modern dispensationalism is not one of faithful exegesis, but of invention, deception, and distortion. For nearly 2 millennia, the church confessed that one covenant people of God, Israel fulfilled in Christ and his church. So you go through this and you start talking about John Nelson Darby and C.I. Schofield, who was in Dallas-Fort Worth area, the Dallas Theological Seminary, which creates all
it's the hub of the whole system,
of the whole heretical system.
Yeah.
And then there's somebody else who lives in Dallas, Taylor Marshall, who's at the Catholic Information Center. I just put that in there because Dallas has a strong theological root. The next slide goes back to the origins of the Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism, the Committee of Catholics to Fight Anti-Semitism, 1939. Who one of the founders was Dorothy Day. And Dorothy Day was a pro-Bolshevik. She supported the Bolshevik Revolution. And Dorothy explained that she had maintained friendships with prominent American, with Anna Louise Strong. And I said, Strong. She's got to be related to Maurice Strong. Oh,
The
yeah. Well,
eugenics.
anyway, yeah. And then you got one of the core issues or products they produced was a journal called The Voice. The Voice was published in direct opposition to Father Charles Coughlin. There you go. I mean,
Yep.
this is when it started. So you go to the next slide. Anna Louise Strong and Maurice Strong were cousins. She was a prominent journalist and activist, and Maurice Strong was a businessman and diplomat. They were colleagues, and then Maurice Strong and Ferdinand Eberstadt were colleagues who worked together during their time in government, particularly in relation to the UN Atomic Energy Commission, who, by the way, John Holdren was a part of, that won the Nobel Peace Prize. Their professional paths crossed in context of public administration and international relations. This is one big spider's web.
Wow.
And you go to the next slide, you got Maurice Strong and John Holdren. They played significant roles in environmental policy and science diplomacy, particularly during the 1972 Stockholm Conference, which was pivotal in establishing global environmental governance. That was the impact on global environmental governance. That it was a turning point in international policy. It started the entire consolidation of power that we're seeing today. So you go to the next slide. Oh, wait,
and that was
wait.
the precursor to the Rio conference.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then you got fires going on in Europe right now, and you see the rhetoric and all the press that's owned by them. And you're wondering who's starting the fires and why they did that in Brazil in 2019. And I know who started the fires here because I have firefighters here. This is all part of this. This is all
The
theatrics and
backpackers.
spectacle. Yeah. Yeah.
The backpackers, it's like 9/11. They get caught and they get released.
Yes. Yes. So here you got your from 1968 to 1991, your series of propaganda: the population bomb, Paul Ehrlich, the limits of growth, which is the who's who of the eugenics movement, eco science with John Holdren, what's his name, Maurice Strong, Our Common Future, the first global revolution. So then you go to the next slide. You'll start to see patterns erupting that intertwine the environmental movement with Eberstadt, with John Holdren, with Coalition for Catholics Against Anti-Semitism. You start seeing the network pop up. You go to the next slide real quick. This is when I saw that title. I said, no, these people, I know these people are tied into the global environmental movement. I know they are. I can tell by their rhetoric. So everyone on this screen here, I know personally. I've shaken their hands. Every single person here. And it's from Michael Jenkins, who's the top. He was in the Peace Corps. Jeffrey Skoll. Anyway, I'm pretty sure he's a CIA asset pushing the climate change agenda and carbonization. You got Prince Charles, now King Charles, Carter Roberts, the CEO of World Wildlife Fund. Yeah. John Holden in the top right. You got Steve Schwartzman, a Jew who turned in Chico Mendes into a martyr from the Amazon that became the whole fight for the Amazon narrative. You got Todd Stern, a Jew in the bottom right. I had dinner with him. And you got Al Gore, who I went and got some gasoline to wipe my hand off after I shook his hand. And in the middle, you got George Woodwell in one of his articles, Climate Crisis Could Become a Global Revolution. And then we look at the fires going on today and everything. Come on. So go to the next slide real quick. Who are those people? Who are those people I just showed you? Throughout this period, liberal foundations contributed to the deployment and maintaining of what Steve Bernstein terms the compromise of liberal environmentalism, whereby international environmental protection and a liberal economic order are presented as mutually reinforcing. Then you go down a little bit more. They had a meeting where? In Italy, where the Club of Rome is based, in Bellagio, Italy, World Wildlife Fund, Environmental Defense Fund, World Resources Institute, and guess what? Those all were founded by George Woodwell, who was John Holdren's boss, who I gave the speech to in 2000 and something 9, I think. On the right, Woods Hole, where I gave the keynote speech in 2009. I've been there. I found this. I just knew they had to be behind this whole climate change scam. Well, here you go.
Right. Just so people know, the Club of Rome was when they invented the term global warming. And then they couldn't keep the farce up, so they changed it to global change after a while. And so they have to kind of be quiet about it with the data centers, because it makes no sense. They wanted, a couple of years ago, you're not supposed to use a plastic straw, and now they're doing these things, and they're just hoping. They're magic. It's just like you're just baffled by it all. But it really takes pause. We might mention this on Locals.
There are record fires in Wales, Scotland, England, Norway, Spain, Italy, for record at the same time. And then there's the fires in Canada and obviously Argentina. And that's only the beginning, all at the same time. And, so there's a pattern here going on. So, we're taking this eugenics all the way back to the very beginning, the early 1800s, and the population bomb that is never really, it's all part of this antichrist system that's really just once you decode Kabbalah, it's just part of bringing on the antichrist, these playing with these numbers. And they hate the number of people made in the image of Christ.
In defense of Nicholas Eberstadt, his numbers show that the population is imploding. So, which is really odd. Maybe they were using one of their own to stick it in our face. I don't know. But anyway, on the right box here, a third workshop in Woods Hole in 1988 laid the groundwork for the future climate convention. So that's where the whole thing was drawn up. There. Next slide.
It is a plan to create world communism / world collectivism. Yeah.
Yes. So this is a diagram schematic of world wildlife at the top. Prince Philip, King Charles's dad, the U.S. and British nonprofits, multinationals, environmental movement. Then you'll see underneath them how USAID / CIA was used to seed like institutions across the Southern Hemisphere under indigenous science, mapping political, religious, health, fire, and social. So when you go down another level, you'll see organizations that all start with the name Institute. So when I start seeing the Institute of Religious blah, 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 I said, no, this is a CIA project on this religious crap. So on here, what's interesting, you look under religious, you're going to see SEMI and CPT. That's the Comisión Pastoral da Terra. Where I am right now, literally 30 minutes driving from here, not even that, there is a ranch that's been invaded led by the CPT. It's a Catholic liberation theology group that is a Marxist revolutionaries. And they have sent poor people as cannon fodder to take over a ranch about 30 minutes from me from here. So this stuff is real to me. So if you go down lower, you find the foundations, Heinz Foundation, the Moore Foundation, MacArthur Foundation. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. But what matters is the next slide. You go back up, please. I think you're one up.
Okay.
You go up right there. No, you just passed it. Right there. So this is an environmental movement snapshot. And I had this in my head when I read Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism. And I said, I know there's the same thing for this false, Americanist Catholic thing in the U.S. Well, sure enough, there sure is. They just haven't had a time to make an elaborate slide to show how it's all connected. But you go to the next slide. This is where we're going to get close to ending the presentation is, I just pondering. I said, all these Jews, it doesn't matter if they're rabbis, even if they're rabbis and they're just a one shade different color than Jacob Frank or Zabbatai Zevi, they still want money. And they're all involved in mining and minerals. I said, I know how to get onto Shale XP and find out if there's any Eberstats there. Well, poof, there you go. There's Eberstat, right there in that slide. In B County, Texas, where my uncle, my cousins, and I spent my childhood. I know it like the back of my hand. That oil field, my granddad was one of the people who helped develop that oil field back in the 1930s and 40s. So I know the landowners on this map. And then you go to the right, you'll see B County, Karnes County, Texas. That's the Eagleford Shale. That's the big boom that happened in the last 15 years. But all those are wells owned by Eberstat, one of the Eberstats. And you have to be a paying member to find out which one. But I'm not going to go into it here. I'll go into it in locals. I know the people that developed that field for them. So we go to the next slide, second to last slide. Antonin Scalia's last moments on the Texas ranch, quail hunting to being found in perfect repose. Cibolo Creek Ranch, owned by Texas millionaire John Poindexter, Quote, John said, I had not seen him, and everyone else was up. I knocked loudly. Poindexter said in an interview with the Los Angeles Times. But Scalia was in a large room, the El Presidente suite, and the owner figured that perhaps the justice couldn't hear him. Well, no autopsy was done. And if you go to the next slide, who is Poindexter? He's the owner of Cibolo Creek Rent Boy Ranch. And
Rent boy.
and he's a part of the Order of St. Hubertus. And who is Hubertus? It's the U.S. branch of the Order of St. Hubertus, aka the American Knights, held his first ever meeting at the Bohemian Club in San Francisco. So anyway, that's where I'm going to end it, because once we take all this in and just take the information for face value, you kind of have to stop pointing the finger and say, crap, I was a part of that. I know these people. That this really is a spell casting that's been put on us. And I'm not trying to slander anybody here, but the fact is that these people involved, I don't think that they even know it. I think they're so arrogant and they're just so prideful. So unfortunately, the Coalition for Catholics Against Anti-Semitism is involved with the eugenics movement and with the whole one world government. So it is what it is. And that's the end of my talk. Other than St. Jerome has a great prayer, which if at the end, if I think at some point we should say a prayer, because it's just kind of deep. It got me rocked for about a week because I started seeing names that I knew personally all over the board.
Okay. So before I go to Justin, you also have, and I'm going to ask you, because this is, if people's minds aren't kind of blowing, they're kind of missing something here. But you have to bear in mind, everything we're talking about, everything from Greenpeace to Imaginative Catholics and to the Libertarian Society, they control it all. It's all moving in one direction. You give your money, your attention, you're helping build this beast system. But do you want to? I can really quick fetch some more, because you also have slides that kind of include some of the traditional influencers. And do we want to hit any of those?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I'm happy to hit whatever you want to
We
hit.
can do it on locals, but I kind of want to show you a couple of those. Okay, everybody. John's going to make a couple more connections involving some Catholic groups that we did on another program. So you have here Ralph Reed. Just tell me where to go, John.
Well, when you look at these Ralph Reeds and Robert Schulers and Billy Grahams and these 33rd degree Masons, you go down to the next slide, you got the Christian Coalition. It's Jewish Interest. It's not me saying so. This is an article that was written, Christian Coalition and Jewish Interest. You go down to the Jericho March. All these are related by the money from Ralph Reed to the Jericho March. Stop the Stealing, announced on December 12th, Let the Church Roar, National Prayer Rally 2020 during COVID. Well, dang it. Who was at that meeting? Jonathan Cahn, the Messianic Christian pastor and author, rabbi, I don't think they said, and one of the founders of the Faith and Freedom Coalition, which I mentioned previously today. Oh, there's also Taylor Marshall, the guy that's from Dallas, that worked at the Catholic Information Service, Opus Dei, and then Bishop Strickland. What are they all three doing at these events? I mean, who's bringing them together? And I'm not saying that they're guilty. I'm just saying someone's bringing them together, creating a narrative behind this. So you go to the next slide. You've got these thumbnails of death and doom and fun and salvation and evangelical demon shaking with the Thrive Time show. It's part of the Reawaken America tour, which is led by General Flynn, who's supposedly Catholic, who happens to be working with Pastor Lehmeyer and Jonathan Cahn. Is he a con man or what? You go look at the Concord Fund, which is one of the primary backers of what I showed you in the slide a little while ago, and Leonard A. Leo, who is a part of the Concord Fund. If you go right there, he's had unparalleled influence in shaping the federal judiciary, including Antonin Scalia and what's his name? I can't remember his name. It doesn't matter. But Go on down one more. You'll see Faith and Freedom Coalition, which is Jonathan Cahn, which is funded by the Concord Fund and Americans of Faith. That's the next guy on here is Leonard Leo, Opus Dei Radical Church Takeover. But then you go down one more. This is interesting. This is the vanguard of Catholic NGOs. They all have interconnected funding sources. They, for some reason, all involve these top generals like General Flynn. They involve prominent traditional Catholics and people who are anti-Francis, like Bishop Strickland. And they're inspiring a new wave of Catholicism and patriotism in America. It seems to me that they're just continuing the cancer of Americanism, which is a heresy. And this is tied at the hip with the next slide, Catholics for Catholics, Catholic Prayer for America. We have Bishop Strickland, General Flynn again, Taylor Marshall, Roger Stone, Father Richard Haugen. But what's interesting is that they're all about the pro-Trump Catholics for Catholics. And Steve Bannon is a part of it. And Steve Bannon is a part of the Catholic Information Service and all those other institutes we were talking about earlier today. So that all this is one big poison. Yeah. So when you go to who is behind these movements of Catholic for Catholics, it's you go to the next slide. It's the Freemason and dispensationalist connection. That's who's running. That's who the Catholics are. Dogs on the leash. They're dogs on a leash. And the people that's pulling them around are the Billy Grahams, Pat Robertsons, Rick Warrens, Oral Roberts, Jerry Falwells, and Robert Schulers, high-ranking Masons. Their organizations got the Jewish money that are pulling these Catholics. In many cases, they're honest people. They got blasted off their ships for some reason. They wanted a landing pad so they wouldn't drown. And they're there to save them with these patriot movements. And then because they're Americanists, they don't understand that they're Americanists, they take the bait and run. And they keep them on the reservation. And they never open their minds up to know, we don't want to rebuild America. We want to get rid of the Statue of Liberty and all the Freemasonic values and put in Catholic values, dumbass. So anyway, that's how I'm going to end it.
No, and I think what I'd like to do here is show the last slide where we began, what you just mentioned here. And I'm not an expert on this topic here, but you have a quote here from, I'm assuming it's Archbishop Sheen.
Yes.
And we are not in favor of an established church in America. We do not want an established church in the United States. We do not want an established church and have never wanted it. We are loyal to the United States. Okay, so I'm not an expert on these sorts of things within the Catholic Church. I know there's a debate whether or not he should be sainted, whatever that's called. But, I oftentimes quote his 1947 quote about the church and the anti-church. The anti-church is one that's emptied. It looks like the church, but it's emptied of its essence. Throughout the middle, he was obviously, he became very popular on the Tell Live Vision in the 1950s and 1960s. And, eventually was, part of the, marched up there in the cathedral in Los Angeles and so forth. There's John's mother with Archbishop Sheen. But what he was pushing in the 1950s, it was the Cold War. I'm not being judgy, but this is part of what we're doing here. The Catholics getting out of the spectacle. You have to realize why the church condemned liberalism, Masonic, or we properly call it Judeo-Masonic religion and culture that's being injected. We have to pull ourselves out of this. I know we might, be a little less popular at some neighborhood barbecues talking about these things, but you have to get clear in your mind. This system is anti-Christ. Yeah. And we're so far gone right now, and the world economy is, it's about time to kind of open up and call a spade a spade. So Archbishop Bishop, if you look at some of these some of them are black and white, some of them are color. He was very theatric. He's quite the thespian, and I like the guy a lot. But he would be, this is Archbishop Sheen on television because he had to give cover for Catholics, right? There's still a lot of, the whole thing with JFK's Catholic. He would praise Thomas Jefferson and Madison and I teach this stuff, right? I talk about it every day, but I realize that these guys, this is not the church. They were against the Catholic Church. They're making a counterfeit order, this Protestantism. You can't just kind of be, this is political ecumenism, lesser of two evils. It's late in the day. We have to come out of this kind of stuff. This is not something we should be yoking ourselves up. From the very beginning here, from Cromwell, there was an agreement with the mercantile class, and the end of it is where we're at right now. So in our minds, in our bodies, in our souls, we have to detach from this liberal order. And before I go to Justin, I know you have some thoughts on that. I do not think he should be a saint in any way, not that anybody's asking me, because especially of his yoking himself up with a lot of these Protestant ideas, and even worse, the building, he was, the Crystal Cathedral and this kind of ecumenism, both political. A lot of the trads can see the religious stuff and the synodal church, but they fall into the Catholics for Catholics and Grace Force. And, it's been an upfield fight for me pointing this out, because people are not open to this information, because they want to define what Catholic is through a lot of, this has been condemned. It's going to rot your mind, body, and soul. And it's not a popular message. Go ahead, John.
Well, I showed a picture of my mom just because I'm from one of my lineages is Irish Catholic, and we know the story about the Irish Catholics. They're part of the big problem of American Catholicism, because they were so grateful. There's a lot of reasons why, but it doesn't matter. But a lot of the head leaders of American Catholicism and Americanist heresy were Irish Americans, and so when going through this whole process of awakening of what we're in and understanding the mess, it's easy, or it's probably natural to get mad. Get mad at your family. Why didn't they tell me that? Well, no one knew. You were told that if you're meeting with Archbishop Sheen, you must be doing something right. But then you say, what was wrong? What's Americanism? It's that simple. It was a heresy.
Yeah.
And it misplaced our allegiance. Our allegiance isn't to the Statue of Liberty, Uncle Sam. It's to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And that is a very simple concept that has been erased by Americanism. And so I think that's where calling out the Jews, well, they're the damn enemy. And the enemy is the Talmudic Judaism, which is it's the religion of the Antichrist. The people, they're in the soup just like we are. I don't have any animosity towards any of these people, any of the people we talked about today. But talking bluntly about it, maybe they can wake up like I woke up. Was I any different than Mary Eberstadt? No, I was involved at a high level with all these people. I didn't understand it. I knew that something was wrong. I knew that you had to be a moral relativist to continue with it. Just receive the money and keep on going, and don't question it. Don't question it, John. Well, I questioned it, had all my funding cut. And so that wake-up call it saved me, because then it got me searching why. And now it's so simple, and the conviction comes in, and then you see the courage of people like yourself and Catholic State that are just knocking it out of the park with telling people what's happening. And it will affect people. It will open their eyes. And that's what we should be doing. And this is not about hate and anti-Semitism. It's about loving all of us. For goodness sakes, they're about to kill all of us, including most of the Jews.
I know we're so late in the day and people are talking about anything but something that's kind of, so the dialectic, like on Monday, we're going to start next week. St. Thomas, tells us this is the magic. They control both sides and get you spinning both ways. And I know we have attachments to this world. And that's the message here. We have to lose some of these attachments to this world. And part of it is, whether you're Greenpeace or you're a libertarian or you're American conservative, they're all bought and paid for. You've yoked yourself with the enemy, and it's not popular. And you might feel like a little bit alone. And I'm sorry, but that is the message, I think, of Christ. You might as well think of St. Augustine or St. Thomas here, just getting the money changers tray and just turning it over, because we have to realize that, what we've been sold is good. It's everything good, being a patriot, loving your nation has been corrupted. And we have to kind of understand in the church and in the world what is holy and be able to discern and come out of it. And I'm not preaching. It's a long process into holiness that I'm still working on. And I'm quite open with my community that I don't preach at them. I'm going through this myself all the time. And I need other people that are awaking to build my own faith so that we can all share in fellowship of understanding this stuff. But the ultimate goal is to spread the gospel throughout the world. We're commissioned, we're commanded to do that, and love God before all things. These Americanism, they're idols. And, I think, again, John just said, this Noahide thing is on the immediate horizon. This is getting real, and it might be a little bit scary, but you can come out of it. And ultimately, you're commanded to see this and do not fear. And especially do not fear the power of the stone cutters. We said the word enough along the way. We know what they are. We're going to call it out. Justin, I'm going to let you finish everything off, and then we're going to pop down to locals, and we'll do an analysis of what we just talked about. And we talk a little bit more freely down there.
Exactly. Yeah. So all I want to say is, John, you outdid yourself. Phenomenal,
amazing
presentation. Wow.
Thank you.
I thought we did great work last year or so when we exposed the Jew Paul Singer behind the Fearless Project. But this is like a whole nother level. This is like blowing it up even further. Like anybody watching this video, please like this. Please share this. Please make this go viral. I'm going to do my part to share it all over social media, and I'll save my analysis for locals. So thank you all, and God bless.
Yeah, you did amazing connections there, John, that these aren't just some little organic startup things or people of goodwill, and we just want to have dialogue. You have to be suspicious. You have to go all the way to the commanding heights of the economy and all the way back to the English Civil War, and really even into the Pharisees whose tables Christ took over. There's a pattern here, and you have to see it. It really is a salvation issue. And I sort of, if I got a little excited and jumped in on John a couple times and people are rolling their eyes, I'm sorry about that. But, just some of these, everything gets connected at some point. We have to be able to see this. I don't think there's any virtue in mocking people for being black-pilled and just absorbing their mainstream narrative and their psyops. I think those days should be over. But again, it's us here. We're not funded. And there are a lot of people that do good work at Catholic Answers, and they're going to turn around and then work with these organizations, and I'm not going to name names, but you know who they are. So it's really very pernicious when people are actually selling these, and in turn, like Justin's had to take them, just someone call a name because you simply called out what they're doing and what the agenda is, and then having to deal with that from other Catholics or Catholic influencers. But we're okay about it. I'm just pointing out that this is something that the enemy does not want revealed. Okay, we're going to go down to locals. Thank you all for being here with us, and we are going to kind of hash this out over on locals. So thank you all, and thank you too, and great work.